Having said that, we want to open in a word of prayer. And we have this little agua here. Father, I just ask that you would have your way with us, and that by your Spirit you take your servant and your word, and that you would minister to us this morning. And I pray that we be open to hear, Lord, what you would want to speak to us, and receptive to all that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's open up this morning to Genesis chapter 35. And I'm going to go back a little bit in the passage, because last week we got all the way up to verse 16, but I want to review something and kind of set the stage for us. But you might remember that Jacob and his boys, his family, went into Shechem. And his daughter Dinah had been defiled in Shechem by the prince, who was also named Shechem. And two of the boys, Simeon and Levi, decided they'd get even. And they made an arrangement so that the people in Shechem the men would circumcise themselves, and they would unite with them and be one. While the boys were lying, only to get them in a place where they were vulnerable. And then after this happened, on the third day, when it was the worst for them, they attacked them. And they began to kill them, and they killed every man in Shechem. And so they were a stench in the nostrils of the Hivites and all the people that were in Canaan. And so it brought fear to them. They wanted to know what to do. And God speaks to them. God shows up, and he tells them where to go to Bethel. Now here it is in verse 6 of chapter 35. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, which means house of God, or God of Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him. Now, the interesting thing is he revealed himself to him there, but he had bypassed this place for years when he left. When he headed out to Succoth, which was right by Shechem. His father, Isaac, and his brother Esau were over here, and he's over here. Now we know that he went and visited them, and I'll go through that in a minute. We know that he went and visited them. He had to go by Bethel to do that. But he never went to Bethel again. And that's the place where God met him. And you think, how could that be possible? Why would he not want to go there again? That was a sweet place with the Lord. When you're not following God in the right way, not doing what he asked of us, we try to avoid that. We try to avoid it. You know, we can go through religion and go through our little ceremony, but to come to him and really bring our heart before him, we avoid it. Apparently he did that as well. But that's where God had revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother Esau. Now in verse 8, it says, Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. Now we said last week that Deborah was Rebekah's nurse, so she was with Rebekah, who was with Isaac, way over here. So how did she get over here if Jacob hadn't gone over there to get her? And so he knew his mother was dead, and he took the nurse to be with him. Why? Because she had ministered to him. She knew him when he was a little baby coming out of the womb. So now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried in the oak below Bethel. So it is named Alan Bakuth, which means oak of weeping. There was a lot of weeping that went on at her death. And Jacob was probably doing a lot of that weeping himself. This was a blow for him. And then he says in verse 9, After Jacob returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again. That's how beautiful God is, you know. He shows up at the right time when we need him. I was thinking about a fella that was a mentor to me as a young believer. And I was just searching the scriptures. I wanted to know what everything meant. I wanted to know those hard passages in Hebrews, and I was going after it. And he would send this fella on his motorcycle. Every time I was going through a rock and a hard spot time, every time I was crying out, here come that brother Ralph, minister to me. God shows up when you need him. And so, God appeared to him again, and he blessed him. Our God's a blessing God. And God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. It means he struggled with God. Remember, he wrestled with him. He showed up as a wrestler. Do you ever picture God showing up as a wrestler? Maybe with a tank top, you know, kind of thing. And so, your name will be Israel. He named him again. And God said to him, I am God Almighty, El Shaddai. Be fruitful and increase in numbers. And a nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will come from your body. And the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants. To your descendants. Not to the church, but to his descendants. And then God went up from him, and at the place where he had talked with him, that's where he showed up. And in verse 14, Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked with him. And he poured out a drink offering on him. And he also poured oil on him. And Jacob called the place where God had talked with him Bethel, house of God. This was a sign of devotion and consecration to God. You know, it was an act of worship on his part. Now in verse 16. Then God moved on, or then they moved on. Jacob moved on. And I just stopped there and I thought, you know, he's moving on. He's had a blow in his life, and God has showed up, and he's given him grace to stand up again and go forward. He's had the event at Shechem, and then he's lost Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, who was helping raise him. He's lost both of them. He's took a blow. But then it says he got up, he moved on. And while they were still some distance from Ephrath, which is Ephrathah, Rachel began to give birth, and she had great difficulty in giving birth. As I thought about that, I thought about my wife. She had hardly any difficulty at all when she had our daughter Molly. I mean, we barely got her there to the hospital, and out came Molly. It was just very easy. But I'm sure some of you ladies that are here today had a hard birth. Maybe you thought you weren't going to get through it, but you made it. That child was born. But here she's having a birth that is extremely difficult. Now, before we move on in that, I want to revisit something in Genesis 30, verse 22. Let's just turn back a couple of pages. In Genesis 30, beginning in verse 22. And this is when Leah was having all the children, and Rachel wasn't having any at all. And Leah had Dinah. That was the last child she had. And then in verse 22 of chapter 30, it says, Then God remembered Rachel. And he says, Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her, and he opened her womb. He listened to her. God inclines his ear to hear our prayer. Have you been crying out to God and wondering, what's happening? I don't see God moving. Nothing's going on. God waits for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes he's waiting on us. Sometimes we're waiting on him. Sometimes God is getting things ready. He's preparing things for us. And at other times, he knows it's not good to answer the prayer at that moment in time. But here, it says that God listened to her cry. He listened to her prayer, and he opened her womb. And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and said, God has taken away my disgrace. And she named him Joseph, and said, may the Lord add to me another son. And the name Joseph means, may he add. And so even though she was being blessed with this child that she had been waiting for years, and remember the competition that was going on among the ladies? You know, all of them, Bilhah and Zilpah and Leah and Rachel, they were all having competitions about who could have the most babies. It made me wonder, I was scratching my head as I was going through this, man, they're like baby machines, man. They were just popping out, you know, all over. But she's not getting any. There's this great competition that is going on amongst them. And even as Rachel has Joseph, she says, may he add another, you know. She wasn't satisfied with that. She was crying out for another. So she's having the next child now, 15 years later. You say, well, why did God wait so long? Maybe God knew the outcome. He's omniscient, you know. Now back in Genesis chapter 35, again, it says, latter part of verse 16, Rachel began to give birth, the answer to her prayer, and she had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, don't be afraid, for you have another son. You got your prayer answered. And as she breathed her last breath, for she was dying, she named her son Benoni. And that means son of my trouble. That's a terrible name to have to live with all your life. This is the son of my trouble, Benoni. And so his father changed his name, and he named him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. And so with her last breath, she has that child that she insisted she wanted. She prayed for, cried out for. She had the child when she died. And so Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrathah, that is Bethlehem. And over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar. And to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. You know, that's covered in a couple of verses. But I don't want to move on yet. I want to visit another passage of Scripture because I think we need to see how much this meant to Jacob. He lost his helpmate. Look at Genesis 29, verse 16. Just go back a few pages. Genesis 29 and verse 16. It says, now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. You know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you know that? He looked at her, he thought she's the most beautiful woman that I've ever seen in my life. I would ask for hands, I don't want to embarrass people, but I know that when I saw my wife for the first time, I just blinked and I looked at her. I thought that she's the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. That was it. And there was a crowd full of people, and she walked in, and I didn't see anybody but her. That was it. So, Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. And Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I worked for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. He was willing to hold off all the urges that he had to be with her immediately, and there's no doubt he did want to. But he didn't cared. He could be with her and talk and laugh and take walks together and whatever it might be. That was enough for him. He just, he had the hope of being with her in the near future. And it goes on to say, and Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. And so Jacob served for 7 years to get this woman. But they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Just a few days, 7 years. It's like nothing. And he ends up working 14 years, 7 to get her. Then when he got her, he had to work another 7 years for nothing. Not nothing, and then he got her, but another 7 years without pay. 14 years, men. You worked without pay. How about you guys? Would you be willing to do that? He treasured her. He cherished her. He valued her. She was a priority in his life. This was the greatest thing that ever happened to him other than the Lord being in his life, was this lady being in her life. Do we treat our mates that way? And the answer to that is sometimes. And sometimes we don't. But God desires that we love our mates as Christ loved the church. Did he love us every day? Does he love us every day? Did he lay down his life for us? Right here's the cross. That's what he gave up. That's how much he loves us. And so he says for us to love our mates that way. That's his desire. It gets so easy to ignore each other. It gets so easy to just go on as business as usual. To have expectations that your wife will do everything that needs to be done while we kick back. Doesn't it? And yet God says, no, wake up. Wake up. This is your helpmate. As you minister to her, as you build her up, she will be your helpmate and be enabled to help you and to build you up. And to be there with that good word in due season. With that prayer to God that's going to move heaven and earth for you and to minister to you in your life. So, love her as Christ loved the church. That's an exhortation to myself. I don't sit up here in this chair thinking I'm any different than you are. I'm not. Now let's look back at Genesis chapter 35. Verse 19. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrathah, that is Bethlehem. And over her tomb Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. And then it says in verse 21, and Israel moved on. In other words, Jacob moved on. And those little words, I hope, mean a little bit more now. See, he moved on. And you know what he lost. And he still had to move on. And those things happen to our life. There's been times in the ministry where we've lost people. I mean, not that we lost them, some of them went home to heaven, but others lost. It was like, this is a vital person. God knows him. He has another place for them. He's got another work for them. And it just like, oh. It's like somebody hits you in the gut, knocks the air out of you. And after a while, you begin to not hold on. You begin to have open hands. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. They've been great. They've changed my life and blessed me. And God bless you where you're at. Be as great a blessing where you're at as how you've been here. You begin to do it with open hands more. And that's the way we always should do it, because we don't know what we can hold on to, really. Everything's going to be taken from us at one time. Even the breath that we have, right? It's going to be gone. But not the Lord. Not the reward in heaven. Not the eternal things, the temporal things. And so God's giving us perspective, isn't he? He's preparing us. He's working on us. He's showing us how to have an open heart and open hands. So Israel moved on again. And he pitched his tent beyond Migdol, Eden. While Israel was living in that region, oh boy, here comes another blow. Reuben, his firstborn son, went in and he slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah. And Israel heard of it. That's a perversion, isn't it? Reuben was his firstborn, his first son. And he goes in to have sexual relationships with Bilhah, who was the maidservant of guess who? Rachel. I wondered about this, and I thought, well, maybe after Rachel died, Bilhah could see the great love that Jacob had for Rachel, that he didn't have for her. Bilhah was called a concubine, a secondary wife. And maybe she was not loved in the same way and she was resentful. I don't know. That's just speculation on my part. But she has relationships with his firstborn son from Leah. And so Reuben went in and he slept with his father's concubine Bilhah. And Israel heard of it. Now the interesting thing, there is no record here of him saying anything about this at the time to Reuben or to Bilhah. Now he may have, but that's not recorded. But at his death, just before Jacob's death, he speaks prophetically over his sons. He's going to pray over them. And that's in Genesis 49. Let's take a peek there. Genesis 49, verse 1. And he has something to say as he lays his hands on Reuben and Simeon and Levi and the other sons. In verse 1 of chapter 49 it says this, Then Jacob called for his sons, and he said, Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Now, how could he say that? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You'd be like me saying to Ron, come over here. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the days to come. That's pretty awesome. He's speaking prophetically. And how do we do that? By faith. He had the faith to do it because why? God gave him the faith to do it. God put it in him. There's been times where I have spoken and I knew it was God. And even before, I said, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. Then afterwards, on the ride home, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Lord, why did I say that? Oh my gosh, if that doesn't happen, Lord, I'm in big trouble. But it did happen. Because it wasn't me saying. See, that's the point. Faith is speaking forth. God is speaking forth in faith through us. And so Jacob says, Then Jacob called for his sons and said, Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. And now Reuben is the firstborn, and so he speaks first to him. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might. I had you when I was younger, and the first sign of my strength. Excelling in honor as the firstborn, excelling in power. And then the good part ends. Turbulent as waters, you will no longer excel. Unruly, no longer excelling. Unrestrained in his emotions, his lust. Turbulent as water, you will no longer excel. For you went up into your father's bed, into my couch, and you defiled it. So he didn't say anything throughout those years, but it's recorded here. Probably Moses inserted this in his compilations of all that went on, and he put it here. before he's dead, because Jacob's not dead yet, but he tells you here what happened at his death. And then he has a word to speak to Simeon and Levi who slaughtered the Shechemites. And he says, Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleaded. They were cruel. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and Israel and dispense them in Israel. Let's go back to Genesis 35. So Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Now we know what he was feeling. See, sin has consequences, doesn't it? We may not see the consequences initially, but it's going on. It affects the heart. We may not see it on the outside, but sin has consequences. And now he's going to give us a genealogy of the 12 sons. He said Jacob had 12 sons. He's going to speak about them. And it says the sons of Leah, there were 6. Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob. Simeon, Levi, Judah. The Lord would come through Judah. Issachar and Zebulun. And the sons of Rachel, there were 2. Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's maidservant Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali. Now, Bilhah, right? Her sons, Dan and Naphtali, do you think they were happy with Reuben? Their brother, who went into their mother? I don't think so. And then verse 26, the sons of Leah's maidservant Zilpah were Gad and Asher, 2. These were the sons of Jacob, who were born to him in Padan Aram. And they're going to, from them come the 12 tribes of Israel, the nation of Israel today. Now Jacob, verse 27, came home to his father Isaac in Mamre near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. And Isaac lived, get this, 180 years. 180 years. Does that seem like a long time to you? Everybody that you think wants to live longer and longer and longer. Would you like to be 180? Somebody mentioned about wishing we could do the things in youth. The guy that Jesse was talking about. He wasn't talking about this specific thing, but about how it was good to be young and all that. We saw little guys running around here. Would you want to go back and do it again? I would. No. You don't. I don't think you remember rightly. I really don't. If you want to go back. No. It's been hard enough to get here. I don't want to start this race all over again, my friends. I'm reaching the finish line. You know, I can see it in the distance, and I don't want to go back and start over. You think, well, I can do things right now. Oh, you don't have a clue. You really don't. You just make different mistakes, that's all. See, God uses this thing called life. From birth to they throw the dirt on you. He uses this thing called life in order to teach us and instruct us and reveal himself to us and get us to that point where we're even humble enough to be able to listen to it. Right? And a lot of things we go through is just preparation. We're always looking for, whoa, I got to find this great ministry, or I got to go there, I got to get to that. You know, it's not about that. You think God has a problem with ministry that, boy, without you, we wouldn't make it? I don't think that's the case at all. I was sharing with my brother Owen yesterday about before I came to the Lord. I think I used it individually, just individual evangelism. I think I used to do it more before I became a pastor. I do more corporate evangelism now, but before I think I was doing more individual evangelism as just a layman. You know, I remember working for an inspection company for homes, and that would take me all over the place. And almost everyone I went to, there was opportunity to share with people, to share the gospel. And so in any case, God uses it. That's ministry. That's ministry. You don't have to have a title to go with it. So, the sons of Rachel, we looked at that and all the others. And then it says, these were sons of Jacob who were born to him in Paddan Aram. And Jacob came home to his father Isaac at Mamre near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. And Isaac lived 180 years. And so Jacob and Esau are now 120. Because they were born at 60 years old. They were twins. So they're 120 years old. And then he breathed his last and he died. And he was gathered to his people. See, they believed in a life after death. He was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So Esau and Jacob still had some fellowship at times, and they come together. And no doubt at that time, Esau passed on his genealogical record to Jacob, eventually passed on to Moses, and it's recorded. And I'm going to touch on very quickly chapter 36, because I'm not going to go through chapter 36. I need to do some preparation for Sunday. So chapter 36, this is the account of Esau, that is Edom. And Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, daughter of Anna, and granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. And now, it also says, also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael, and sister Naobah. Now, if you were looking through this and you're trying to research it, understand this, and I wrote this down, that in Genesis 26:34, and I'm saying it so you can get it on DVD or CD, and in 28:9, and Genesis 36:1 and 2, if you compare those genealogies, you're going to find out that they're different. So the names that you read here are going to be different in Genesis chapter 26 than they are in Genesis chapter 36. You might wonder about that. Well, it had to do with, I believe, when they were, before they're married, and then after they're married, and they had multiple names. And there's a very good explanation of that, and I'll read that next week as we pick up on this, in Henry Morris's book, The Genesis Record. It has an excellent explanation of this. So anyway, you go through the names, you read chapter 36, and we will pick up after the intro next week in Genesis chapter 37. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word and for your presence today and your spirit. Thank you, dear God, for your mercy and grace upon us. And Lord, thank you for every individual that's here. And all those that aren't, Lord, that are loving you and belong to you. And I pray that your blessing be on our festivities as we go outside to eat. And I pray that just as many as could, Lord, would come out there and join us. And it's great weather and great food. Thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. Hallelujah. Let's head out and eat.